Hello, Internet, and welcome once again to the always online multiplayer gaming podcast brought to you by mmorpg.com, your home for all things multiplayer related. I'm your host, as always, Mike Byrne, aka magicman, and this is episode 490, closing in on number 500. Closing in on 500. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about. There was a ton of news this week. It's still going to continue with the TGS going on, and of course, leading into Final Fantasy XIV's live letter this weekend. Tark will be streaming that one live, so you'll be able to catch that this weekend if you want to hang out with Tark. Joining me to go over some of the fun news today, Mr. Troy Blackburn, the noob fridge himself. What's up, boss?
Look, I just got stabbed at the doctor's office. I have a boo-boo.
Do you have a?
They stole my blood.
Is everything okay?
Yeah, it hurts a little bit.
Did they give you a lollipop?
No, I was very sad. I cried when I left.
I would have complained until I'm not leaving until I get a lollipop. So unless you want me sitting in this waiting room all day, find me a sucker. They were like, sir, you are one. Get out.
Right. You just let us take your blood, sucker.
Yeah, we don't even have coats here. Like, we're not doctors. What are you doing, dude?
We're just a roaming fan of vampires. Thank you for your donation.
There he is. We got a special guest this weekend. Brian, a.k.a. Ginger Prime, or as I like to call him, the Ginger One.
Well,
Obviously, we've got some fun news this week that you've been pretty vocal about on Twitter, so I reached out and said, hey, you know, we're going to talk about other stuff, but this is going to be in there. Do you want to come on and chat about it a little bit? You were gracious enough, and your wife, who I thank tremendously, was gracious enough to give us some of your time. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been too long. As always, every time I get to sit down and hang out with you, Mike, it's always a good conversation. And unfortunately, it's always just filled with these gaps of our lives being incredibly busy. But thanks so much for reaching out, man. I appreciate it. And hello to everybody listening. Hopefully you guys enjoy today's show. Like, sub, share, and comment below all the standard stuff that helps out these in the outro.
Yeah. If you're listening on Audible or iTunes, Spotify, whatever, give it a like, a subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notifications, feed the algorithms. But most of all, if you like what we do here, tell a friend. It's fast, it's easy, it's cheap, it costs you nothing, and it's the best way to support us. And of course, head on over to mmobomb.com, review your favorite games in all of our game pages for your fellow gamers, because that's the site that actually pays the bills. Let's get started with the news. All right, what do we got? We got some new announcements. Now, obviously, a lot happened this week, as I mentioned, but we can't cover it all in an hour-long podcast. So go to MMOBomb. There's new news on Throne and Liberty, their producer's letter talking about all kinds of bosses, some great-looking screenshots, even if you're kind of like up in the air and a little dicey on that game and what they're going to do with certain things that we've reported on, the combat and all that fun stuff. Definitely worth checking out the producer's letter to see some really cool boss stuff. We've got a ton of other things as well. So I've picked a few here, but I encourage you to hit up the site because there's just a lot more going on this week. First up, there's going to be a Division 3, Troy. Yay!
Official announcement, the Division 3 is coming. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of felt like, you and I were fans of Division 1, even through its flaws, and Division 2, through its flaws again. Those are both games that I think both of us have talked about before, and we're like, we love these games 8 months after they come out. Like, these are great games 6 to 8 months outside of launch. So hopefully we won't see that with the Division 3. And we kind of had to, like, we've got the Division Heartland and like all these different spin-offs and mobile stuff that we've known about for a year or so now. We're getting trailers and little bits and bobs, but we'd never heard anything about Division 3. And we kind of knew, okay, are they just going to go do offshoot stuff? Is this mainline done? Because Division 2, while it has a respectable player base, it is on the downturn. It is getting a bit long in the tooth. It is now confirmed, but it was confirmed in a really weird way. Like, Ubisoft did not pump a presser out there and say, hey, Division 3 is a thing. Here's some basic details of stuff we're going to add and blah, blah, blah. No, it was just a tweet.
Yeah, it's coming. We all thought you fit. knew that this day would finally come. So here you go. That's weird that it is a tweet, no trailer that was like, hyped up event.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm happy to see it. I'm happy the fact that that's, it's going.
The thing with it too it wasn't even a tweet announcing Division 3 per se. If you go
That's
to
what
the
I was going to say. It wasn't even really about the Division 3.
If you go to the tweet from Massive Entertainment, like obviously a subsidiary of Ubisoft, and you click on the news article in the tweet, it actually takes you to a news article of what they were announcing with the tweet, that Division 3 just happened to be mentioned. Julian Garrity has been appointed executive producer for the Tom Clancy's The Division brand. Julian will oversee all games and products, including Tom Clancy's The Division 3, led by Massive Entertainment, who is actively building a team for the game. And then the news article is about Garrity and his experience and what they think he brings to the team and all that usual stuff. And Brian, if you think that name sounds familiar, it probably will be, because this is the person heading up Star Wars Outlaws for Ubisoft. Kind of a weird, oh, hey, by the way, I'm also going to run the Division 3.
Running both. Like, that's a lot on anybody's plate. And how close is Outlaws?
I don't think we have the date yet, do we?
Because, like, I mean, I guess, like, if he's a high level, I'm just, obviously one person doesn't do all the work, but
yeah, it's just 2024 still.
Where, we're talking Yoshi P running 16 and 14, in that producer role. Like, it can be done, but whew, I guess nobody else, or maybe it's a transitional period. What do you think?
Well, he says, or from Ubisoft, they say, by the way, Julian remains fully committed to making Star Wars Outlaws a success for both the development team and fans. He will remain on the project through launch to ensure the game meets the intended creative vision and provides a great experience for players. So he'll still be heading up both, and then probably, the way this is worded, Troy, transitioning fully off of Outlaws once it actually reaches its gone gold printed and shipped status. So it sounds like maybe there's a little bit of overlap, but like the Division stuff is really just kind of in its infancy and doesn't really need that whole executive producer hands-on day-to-day thing. Go ahead, finish Outlaws, then you're going to move to this. By the way, you're in charge of the brand.
Yeah, it definitely comes across as this is your next full-time gig. You're gonna oversee it for now and sort of be in charge as the executive producer. But once Star Wars Outlaws is done, it sounds like he's moving on to the Division for sure.
Yeah, and this could also be just kind of a good kind of way of promoting him, and him like saying, "Hey, you've seen my work, and I want this." Maybe the Division ends up being a bigger lift, a bigger payday for him. If that's any of those things be true, congrats to him. And yeah, at the end of the day, though, it's going to come down to how does the game launch, how is it received, and I think, and I'd love to see Star Wars have a really incredible, game in Outlaws. I think a lot of people would really, be excited by that. So I wish him all the best. I don't envy him, because it sounds like he's got a lot on his plate.
Stojan in chat saying, I just bought Division 1 for $1 on Xbox. So you'd buy that for $1. That's a RoboCop reference for you young kids. Look it up.
Them RoboCop references.
Dim RoboCop references. I can't wait. I will say that when I was proofreading the article and adding some links to it and stuff to get it out there, I was like, oh shit, Division Heartland is still a thing. We're like, when's the last time we wrote about that? And then I went and looked to see if there was new news, and I'm like, yeah, there is like nothing on any of these Division projects going on right now. Ubisoft has a lot cooking. They're also under fire this week for trying to force Montreal studio employees back into the building. Total separate point. Check out the article on mmobomb.com. A lot of people feeling like Ubisoft breaking promises. I don't know why you're surprised. I honestly don't. It's Ubisoft. It's Ubisoft. In other big new announcements, now, we should preface this, Brian, with pour tons of salt on this shit. Like, tons of it. A new EverQuest MMORPG title that, for I guess this conversation, will make it easy on ourselves and just refer to it as potentially EverQuest 3.
Yeah.
Has been announced? Question mark? Enad Global, in their conference reporting, showed a splash screen talking about H1Z1, Mech Warrior, some future plans for both titles, some potential funding, timing, and what stage those projects are in. Also on that slide was EverQuest, referred to as a live service MMORPG, starting some type of work. Right now, it's in kind of like the ideation phase. Starting work in 2025 with a very ambitious completion date of 2028 if they're just starting in 2025. I have to believe, Brian, there's probably some stuff going on behind the scenes already we don't know about.
I mean, we know that EverQuest 3, next, was announced, and they showcased off of a lot from that original announcement. That was a big announcement. I remember watching the whole thing, and I never took time to play EverQuest 1 and 2, but when I saw that, I was like, this is absolutely something I'm going to check out as a fan of the MMO. And then nothing ever came out of it. And it would be interesting to see if they were able to kind of salvage any of that stuff and then bring that into this new project, to see if they can actually make something in that IP, which it feels weird that from the genre as itself, as it's seeing a new resurgence, as we're seeing lots of new games step in, and that, with that label MMO, that EverQuest isn't among them based off of just how impactful it was to the genre back in the day.
In the presentation, Troy, very interesting that when, what's his name? I'm sorry, I'm missing his name. Ji Ham, CEO of Enad Global. When he presented this portion, he said, EverQuest, our most important IP. We said that probably was the case when Enad Global bought Daybreak all those years ago. They picked up EQ1, EQ2, whatever was left of EQ Landmark, whatever was left of EQ Next. And we thought, they're going to do something with this. What it'll be, we want it to be an EQ3, but we're probably going to get some shitty card game based in Norath. Or, they're going to do something with the IP. And then they just didn't. And a year and a half or so ago, we had some job postings we reported on that seemed to indicate something was going on with EverQuest, in addition to a Marvel MMORPG, which fell apart and was later canceled. But they're referring to it as their most important IP. I got to agree with them, right? It is the one that, even if the game was terrible but nobody knew it, it would have 1 million+ players on day one checking it out to see if it was good or terrible, right? Just the name, even for people who never played the originals, is still a draw, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely a draw. I would argue that maybe Mech Warrior is maybe more mainstream, which was also on that slide with EverQuest. As
point.
Projects they want to work on. But EverQuest would absolutely, especially in this day and age where we're so hungry for new MMOs and AAA MMOs and quality stuff, and I would argue maybe some nostalgia mixed with some of the new technology that's available since EverQuest and EverQuest 2 came out. Because let's face it, there's a lot of new technology and systems and things like that are available in MMOs nowadays than when those games first came out.
This is a scary one, though, right? If you think about it, this is, if you're going to do this, go EverQuest, go MMORPG. Those are two things we know from their slide are sure, whether it's a direct sequel or anything. We don't know that. We don't know visuals. We don't know monetization, anything. This has got to be a one and done, right? If you don't do it right, EverQuest is just dead at that point.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes out and it's a terrible monetization model, it's a boring game, insert all the things that can go wrong with a live service launch, Brian. If you don't do it right, we never see an EverQuest again, I don't think.
Yeah, and that's the fact, because it's an established IP, and people would expect that they would have their act in line, as opposed to where you would see a new IP come out and kind of struggle out the gate, because that's just how gamers are, right? So your first attempt, we can be a little bit more forgiving, but then you've done it 3 times. Why is this one struggling? And that's dead IP, though, I guess maybe in terms of that for that genre, but if they ever wanted to take that as a brand name and spin it off,
that's
something else,
that's fair. I'm referencing it as a live service MMO at that point.
Yeah. At that point, because here's the challenge that you also have with EverQuest is that you have people who have nostalgia for its sandbox roots. We know that sandbox MMORPGs aren't the most popular in terms of just player numbers, and we know that people really dive into the player numbers to determine if they want to then play that game. And so people might see a lower player population count and write it off, even if it is a perfectly decent game. And so my hope for the future is that we see the hybrid theme park and sandbox, like a sandpark MMO that takes the best of both and brings them together. And if they could do something like that, then I think they could really hit on all cylinders. The problems that we've seen in the lacking is that either you go to theme park or you go to sandbox, and if it's just too different enough, people get frustrated. And then if you run into bugs and connection issues, people are just going to go, "Why am I bothering wasting my time when I can go and play a stable?" And then at least I know what I'm getting when I go to this restaurant, as opposed to this restaurant that's just clearly not ready for prime time.
Yeah, and then you also have the fact that even though this would be Enid Global's first foray into an EverQuest MMO, the larger news becomes if it failed or was just poorly received, right? You'd be like, no, or canceled, right? Never came out. That's good. That's another concern right now. Now that the thought of it being out in the wild is there, and Enid Global was the one that put it there, not press with rumor or speculation based on job posts, Troy. If this never sees the light of day, I think that's almost still as damaging. Because who cares that Enid Global took one shot and decided to cancel it? When you think EverQuest, you think Landmark, gone, next, never made it out. Now EQ3 or whatever they're going to call it, never made it out or was received poorly. It compounds the failure. And I saw you shaking your head when Brian was talking, Troy. I know you love sandparks or sandbox MMOs. That is your forte. But as Brian was talking about, look, this is play it safe, go the hybrid, go a nice mix of both. Even you, a sandbox fanboy, were like, yeah, that's the way to go.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to go, especially for the EverQuest franchise. You can't abandon your roots too awful much.
It would be brutal if they abandoned any sandpark stuff, because sandbox stuff 100%. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Do you want to see this box with a sub, a free-to-play? Like your ideal world, Troy. And EQ3 comes out 6 months from now. What model do you want that game having?
I like buy to play right now. I think buy to play is a good spot for a lot of games. You buy that initial box price, no monthly sub. They're gonna put a cash shop in there regardless whether it has a sub or not. So for me, buy to play is pretty much the premium example of what I enjoy.
Is weird. The premium example is what we all grew up on. You buy the game and you play the game.
Yep.
And now we're
Imagine that.
Could you please just sell me? I want to buy your product. I want to buy your product. I'd love to sell it to you. That's just not how it works. That's just not how it works.
The submodel doesn't make foundational sense in a world of Game Pass and PS Now and all the various different services. Like we've been hyper subscriptioned out to the point where when you say, hey, what do I get for my subscription? You get to play one game, and then you're like, oh, for that same price, I can go play 1,000 games, have access to, and some of those games happen to also be MMOs. And so for the next generation of gamers out there, adding in that subscription to play the game it's becoming a bigger and bigger barrier, especially right now economically, where a lot of people could be struggling just to make the rent or do various just normal things.
Yeah, setting aside even like economic conditions, you look at it and you go, in a post Game Pass world, a sub makes less and less sense. By the way, we're not going to be talking too much about it on today's show, but we did put up an article on MMOBomb. The CMA in UK has conditionally approved the Microsoft purchase of Activision Blizzard with their new proposal to ship off all the cloud stuff to Ubisoft and then have the licensing deals fly from Ubisoft, even a licensing deal back to Microsoft for its own damn games to publish them via cloud. The CMA kind of did slap them a little bit. They said, hey, this was, a better solution. This should have been presented as a potential solution when you submitted. They did have a few additional concerns that Microsoft seems to have addressed, but there is still an open, hey, if you have questions or concerns, you have till October 6th to say something. It looks like the biggest stumbling block in that whole debacle is over. So we're going to see that merger complete, I would imagine. And Troy, you and I said there's no way this doesn't complete. It doesn't reach monopoly status. You'd have to have real strong justifications for stopping it, and it just didn't look like anybody had them. Finally, on the new announcements front, we've got some Soulframe information. Not a lot here, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I know a lot of us are looking forward to Soulframe, the MMO coming out of Digital Extremes, the company behind Warframe, with their mysterious site and some different footage we've shown. Not a lot here, but worth noting, Troy, they said, hey, if you are cool with Warframe and the way we do content delivery and things like that, Soulframe's going to follow the same formula. I think that makes a lot of people happy.
Yeah, it should make a lot of people happy. Warframe's considered one of the better models out there. You've got the cash shop, you've got long grinds to get some things in game, but you can still get them in game. You got to wait to craft your suits and stuff like that, but you can still just craft them in the game. You don't have to buy them in the cash shop. And then you got large content updates that just come out for free constantly. Large open world content updates that come out for free quite often. So, if you're happy with Warframe, according to them, there shouldn't be a lot of reason for you to not be happy with the way Soulframe does things.
Yeah, Chief Creative Officer Steve Sinclair saying in an interview with Play Magazine, first reported by MP First, that yes, I think gamers can be rightfully exhausted by some of the different business models out there, but I'm hoping we can continue Warframe's reputation as being when something cool comes out, there's generally a positive reaction of, hey, I can't believe I'm getting this for free. Okay, I'm going to buy something because I like these devs, or there's a wicked-ass cosmetic and I can live without it. There are just no barriers. This was fantastic news. However, you do have to kind of go, I think you burnt a little goodwill with the way Wayfinder Early Access came out, Brian. So let's ease back and just watch for a bit.
Yeah, I think that's always a good call, especially with games as a service. I think if you are somebody who's notoriously day in, day zero with any launch of a games as a service game and notoriously frustrated and mad by that experience, like my best advice is to give it some time and then step in. People were asking me like, hey, you're going to play it at launch? And I was like, I plan on trying to play. And then I was like, oh, I'll just wait. And so I played Halo with some friends and we've been enjoying the new Halo season. But I was like, and they're like, oh, when are you going to play? I was like, well, I put myself in queue. It won't let me through the queue yet. I'll play when they're ready for me to play. I'm thankfully, I guess I wasn't like, I got to be there day and date. And I think that's actually a really healthy thing for me because even as a content creator, I'm like, the content I make around the game will get done when it gets done. I'm not going to be your first source of it. And yes, I miss out on that, but that's okay. Like I'm going to play I try to play games in a very healthy, balanced way,
Yeah.
So but it is like, so if anybody is with Soulframe, it's like, there's nothing wrong with about being hyped and excited. And I want to hope that they have an incredible launch, but we also know Warframe did not. The devs continued to put in the work. And so I feel like they've earned a good reputation. And so with Wayfinder and with Soulframe, I'm not worried about the future of those games because I think the devs have, in my mind, have really shown me their quality. And it doesn't mean that their first, foray is going to be smooth. But then I'm not going in expecting that experience as a veteran games as a service MMO player.
Yeah, and that's something that I've said here too. I was like, we often, Troy, when Wayfinder launched, and you and I were giving it a little flack for the way its early access launched and throwing a little flack at Digital Extremes, even though they're not the developer, they're the publisher, so generally would be more responsible for servers than Airship Syndicate would have been as the primary developer. I said, people look at Warframe and go, the people that did Warframe had this issue, and it was like, we look back with rose-colored glasses on Warframe because of what it is today. 10 years ago, Warframe had a horrid launch. It was really, really bad. It got better, and so hopefully it will for Wayfinder too. More news on Wayfinder on mmobomb.com. Tokyo Game Show, they revealed Grendel, the first non-human playable character to be added to the game, coming soon, and you can see little previews of that. All right, gents. Here we go.
The section.
In the show notes, it just says, All right. So, Brian, I'm going to go to you first after I set this up because I'm not fully versed on your stance. Like, we follow each other. We're friends. We've known each other for a long time. I've been able to catch bits and pieces of you tweeting and talking to people, putting a video up here and there on stuff. So before we like dive into this portion, I do want to kind of let you encapsulate your overall view so that I don't misrepresent it having seen 3 tweets, but not those 2, that type deal.
Yeah, thank you.
So it came out through leaked content, not on behalf of the FTC, by the way. It was actually Xbox that accidentally leaked these emails and materials, that Microsoft would like to buy Nintendo, or at least did want to buy it just a few years ago. And in some emails, they said, hey, we're not interested in like a hostile action. Nintendo would be a good get. They've been buying stock in Nintendo for a while. A lot of companies do that. That's not odd, but they have been, buying more and more and more, but again, are not interested in a hostile action, but that Microsoft would more like to just play the long game. And this did not come as a surprise to me, but apparently it was a surprise to a lot of people that Microsoft would talk behind the scenes with its employees about buying a competitor. One, if you own a large-scale company and you aren't talking about buying any of your competitors behind the scenes, you're not running your business right. You may not actually move on that, but there are always discussions you should be having. Can we buy Sony? Could we just buy them out? No, not going to work. Pros, cons. That's part of running a business.
Correct.
And 2, we actually had reports in 2021 that Microsoft approached Nintendo at one point about this.
And
now, it was...
room.
And they got laughed out of the room. Nintendo politely, or maybe not so politely, laughed and sent them out of the room. So none of this was a surprise to me, but apparently was a surprise to many people. That's fine. Now these emails show they did have those discussions. The internet kind of started going crazy about, would this be good for gaming? Would this be good for consumers? Would this be bad for gaming? Bad for consumers? Good for Nintendo? Bad for Microsoft? Good for Sony? And there was a lot of rallying to fan bases, which I'm not a fan of. We'll talk about that in a second. Brian, I'm going to give you the opportunity here to kind of encapsulate your view on whether something like this, a Microsoft purchase of Nintendo specifically, would be good for gaming, good for business, good for consumers. Where do you stand on the entire shebang? And then Troy will come to you for your take on it.
All right, so I'm gonna, if you give me a couple minutes in this case, because there is a lot of context that I feel like hopefully we'll set it up.
Go
so that
for
people
it.
Where I'm coming from. Also, for people who are surprised by this, those are clearly non-Ginger Prime subscribers because I've been talking about this
for years.
I've looked into just the market cap stuff. My dad is really into that, so we sit down and talk theoretical, thought experiments on the industry, because it's just fun for us to talk about the stuff we nerd out. He knows the finances side. He doesn't understand the games. I understand the games. I don't understand what he's talking about, but it's still hanging out with my dad, and I think that's a win. My fundamental, like, I guess if you're going to talk about a core belief when it comes to video games, is I believe video games everywhere is a good philosophy for games. That's not to say that I am sitting here saying that everybody should just buy it and we should just get to this, monopoly of one company controlling games. I think that would be horribly, horribly wrong. However, out of what we will say is the big 3, but we're discounting Amazon to our peril. We're discounting Tencent to our peril when we just use that phrase. But when we look at the classic...
to be fair to that phrase, though, I have, at least personally, I have always generally associated that phrase, the big 3, to be more of the console companies, not gaming companies in general. I would absolutely agree with you that Tencent is fucking massive. They're massive. And Amazon, although maybe not a big player publicly yet, besides New World and some failures before that, and the publishing of Lost Ark, they're going to pick up Blue Protocol publishing. They're going to be the ones picking up Throne and Liberty publishing. How those games do, that has yet to be seen. We'll know that soon. But they are obviously not shy dumping dollars down this hole, including some of their other stuff that they have planned that we've heard rumors about regarding cloud gaming and other things. So, I've always interpreted the big 3 as not gaming companies, but the console manufacturers. But maybe that's me.
No, that isn't you, but I'm saying that when we talk about it, because that's an important distinction, and ideally, hopefully, will state this clearly. It becomes a challenge because there's nostalgia that's baked into a lot of people. Y'all should know I'm a diehard Nintendo fanboy, And I'm the guy who's mad at Nintendo because of their like DMC, because of their digital rights systems. I'm also frustrated by them from their hardware perspective. But I'm the guy who also spends every waking, like they are the first purchase whenever they release a new piece of hardware that I'm in line, and so I'm my own worst enemy in that aspect. But they're a company that's absolutely flush and rich with it. So when I look at the industry as it exists right now, people talk about monopolies, right? And the way I view games is I view IPs as actually monopolies. There is no Xbox equivalent of Mario. There's no Sony equivalent of Mario. You could say that there's other games that you enjoy playing, and because there's other games that those in fact compete. But I look at social media and video games in a special kind of category because they have a special kind of connection with us as humans. And you can see that in how people talk about it, how they defend it, how you even just look at the console wars themselves. But what we're also seeing at that same time, right now in the handheld market, because of games in more places, and again, I don't like that Microsoft isn't publishing Bethesda games on Sony. I fault them for that. But my view and the hope here, and these are all if statements as a thought experiment, is that at some point, then they can go to Sony and they can start to negotiate, because Sony has no incentive to start publishing more games on PC and on Xbox. They can play their game, and it's their rights to do so. But as a consumer and as somebody with an opinion on it, what we're seeing is an explosion in the handheld market because there are more games, where before the handheld market has been primarily dominated by Nintendo based off of their IP. It is a requirement to play a Nintendo game to own a piece of Nintendo hardware. Outside of Nintendo, though, we're seeing Microsoft bring games day and date. We're seeing Sony to start to make and start to signal that, and I want to champion that. So whether it was a acquisition from Microsoft or an acquisition from Sony, or just the threat of an acquisition that gets people talking and asking the question, why can't I play Nintendo games where I play games? I'm still supporting Nintendo because what we have happen and what I do not support is piracy. Now, there it gets a legal kind of gray around. If you own the game, then you can emulate it. And I actually agree. I'm like, yeah, if Nintendo isn't going to give me the option to give them money for where I am, then I'll buy the game and I'll emulate it so I can run Zelda Tears of the Kingdom at 60 frames per second. So I can have a experience that I choose to go and have that premium experience. So
yeah,
overall,
I mean, something that I've talked about openly on this show and other shows with you, Troy, about
the same page in that, yeah.
People I know buying Switch games and, maybe getting them to play through some means on their Steam Deck.
Yeah,
people
friends,
good friends
of mine, then I may know that do that. But isn't that a different discussion though? That seems to me not about a discussion on is Nintendo buying or Microsoft buying Nintendo good or a bad, a net good or a net bad. Isn't that just a different discussion on the availability of games on platforms? Something that on this point, at minimum, I think all three of us will agree, but particularly Brian, you and I would agree that we're proponents of, I would love for you to be able to play Mario Wonder on Steam. I would love for you to be able to play Mario Wonder on Xbox. I would love all of those things. You can't right now, but I am huge and in favor of, I don't want you to have to buy a Switch to play a Mario game. I want you to buy a Mario game and play it anywhere. But that's kind of a separate pro or con versus buying the actual company, right?
Right. And so then from that base and that viewpoint and the fact is, like, if all of a sudden Nintendo games started showing up on PC, right? Nintendo's own free will, they're like, we're going to start putting our games on PC. You'd see their stock just go through the roof, because that's just going to open up their games to way more sales and a lot longer longevity. But what you also see is more handheld innovation. And that's the thing where I look at that and why I classify the IPs as a monopoly, is that it wasn't until games started being put in more places that all of a sudden people are like, oh, we can actually release a handheld. We can release it at $700 and it can have these features. Oh, we're going to release this $300 handheld and we're going to have cloud streaming. It ends up opening up that level of innovation for third parties to start stepping in, as opposed to, like, if you were going to try to release a handheld, you were going to get crushed by Nintendo no matter what. And that's what we've seen happen time and time again. And so, therefore, when I look at the
Rip
acquisition
PS Vita, PSP, rip.
and how much stronger would a Vita PSP be today if all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you can play your PlayStation games, you can play your Steam games, or however you want to play whatever you want to game. We're going to stop being the gatekeeper here. Now, back to the Microsoft acquisition in this case. I wasn't surprised by any of this. I've been following this. We've been speculating on this for a little while. Same thing with other Japanese studios. Microsoft needs Japan. Japan doesn't need Microsoft. And so they they have to figure out, how do you start to bridge that gap? Would I be upset if Microsoft bought Nintendo? Not at all. Would I be upset if Sony bought Nintendo? Maybe. And that is only because we haven't seen Sony make that same level of commitment. However, that does not then divorce the idea that, am I concerned with Microsoft buying Nintendo from a games and an access? Because again, if these are all IPs, they're creating, in my mind, multiple different monopolies. And if they ever decided to pull back that view, that vision, which they could, leadership changes, right? Phil Spencer is human. Satya is human. At some point, somebody could come in and want to completely structure that company differently. It'd be weird because they've taken Microsoft into the trillions based off of this everywhere approach. But that being said, it's like, yeah, there are concerns. So the joy in all of this is as a thought experiment, because Microsoft isn't buying Nintendo that we're aware of. It comes down to, this discussion is something that gamers need to be talking about. And I'm perfectly fine having the position that if Microsoft does decide to buy to Nintendo, my life is not over. I am, okay, cool. But is that
a good thing for gamers? If Microsoft bought Nintendo, is that good for gamers?
If they then, and the if is the key aspect, if they then continue and bring then Nintendo games to PC, then yes, that's good for gamers, because the people actually get more access to it, not less access to it. If you start saying, hey, you're going to start having less access, which their view of Starfield, I can understand, because right now Sony doesn't want to come to the table, but I believe that would bring Sony to the table and discuss and sit down and say, and it's not that I think that these games all need to happen day and date. I believe that from a development perspective, speaking professionally, it is much easier to release for one platform than multiple. But I would be perfectly fine with a timed exclusivity aspect where, hey, God of War is going to be on Sony for 1 year, and then we're going to push it out to Microsoft, and they're going to make money because people are going to buy those games. And then what you're going to see happen is you're going to see the breakdown of these silly and dumb console wars, and anything that gets, and there'll still be people who are like, my box is better than your box, yada yada yada, but it just becomes more about building communities around games rather than building communities around devices. And that is what I view as an ultimate good. But that is obviously predicated off an if statement, that because Microsoft, if they decided, no, we're just going to publish this on our Xbox console, then that in and of itself would be a great evil, and I would absolutely oppose that. But based off of what we've seen with Microsoft right now as a track record, they're putting more games and having it more accessible than has ever been done in history or any other company. But that's just my take. Hopefully that makes some sense.
I do have a few questions, but I want Troy to chime in on his opinion here.
I think that it would be a good thing for consumers, because I think that it would spread Nintendo games to more platforms. Now, looking at the Activision Blizzard acquisition, I would love to see Sony in panic mode if Microsoft, say, were to be acquiring Nintendo based on how they act with Activision Blizzard. Can you imagine that like tenfold if number 2 and number 3 are coming together all of a sudden, and then they're coming for that booty PlayStation? So, it would be interesting to watch that part play out for sure. But at the end of the day, I think, topics of monopolies aside, because Sony would still exist, and they're still number one, that to see Nintendo games, I would love, I'm with some of the folks in chat, man, I would love to play like actual Mario Kart on the PC on Steam instead of having to wait for, good kart games to come out and something that rivals that. I would love to play, Breath of the Wild on Steam. That would be a fantastic experience. To be able to play it on PC and get that type of performance out of it, and get that experience of playing it on my PC instead of having to own a Nintendo console, which obviously at this point I'm just not going to do because I haven't done it up till now.
Okay, so ideal Christmas land, I get it. Like, I get it. I want all these games available on everything, too. I'm in a very blessed position where the console wars or the PC versus console, like, I'm in a blessed position where none of that matters to me. I own all of these, and I own all of them on day one. That's a very, very fortunate position for somebody to be in, and I recognize that. So I don't have a dog in the race of PlayStation versus Xbox versus Nintendo versus PC. I just play them anywhere. But I can appreciate somebody being in a position like I was growing up and in my early adulthood where it was, I can get one.
Yep,
Which one am I going to get? And at different times, I was more a Sony player than a Microsoft player. Then, the next Xbox 360 came out, and that was the generation that I was an Xbox player more than a Sony player. So I kind of go where my games go rather than, hey, I'm a Sony baby or I'm a Microsoft baby or I'm a Nintendo baby, and that's the product I'm going to buy first. I've never really had that brand loyalty to the console since my teenage years with, the original NES and Super Nintendo. Ideal Christmas land-wise, I get it. Like, that's great. Have all these companies condensed to one company, and then every game is available everywhere. Cool. But I don't know if I buy into the idea that potentially Microsoft buying Nintendo or another big purchase amongst these top 5 dogs. I don't know if that's good for a game. These companies aren't your friend, first off.
Right. Good point.
They just aren't. They aren't. When a company bigger than your local board game store does anything good for consumers, it's because it's expected to return a bigger bottom line, not because they specifically wanted to do something nice and good for consumers. There's a business point where you become such a big business that you really don't worry about losing customers anymore. You just worry about how to pick up the next one, right? Customer acquisition costs are fun. They're not your friends. And I also feel like there is the creativity bubble that you need to talk about here, right? A lot of these are companies that are publicly traded, that have fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders to do everything they can to maximize and increase profits, not help you play Mario on your PC. Will it lead to more money? Cool, we'll do it. Will it not? Fine. Now, you've said, hey, if Microsoft continues on this trend that they have, which while I'm in favor of them making things generally more available, I don't know if that's exclusively their trend, as we've seen with ZeniMax and Bethesda's stuff lately. Saying, hey, it's available on the Xbox and the PC day one, that's 2 different places to play it. Well, generally, most Microsoft products are going to be available on PC, so that's not really surprising to me. It's not like they opened up a new area of business for them.
Cloud, but yes.
Well, cloud is, yeah. That's fair. That's fair, and they've got some stiff competition in that area before they're going to be far and away favorite.
Starfield, ultra wide, because I can run Starfield at over 120 frames a second in my ultra wide through GeForce Now. Like, it is such a beautiful experience that like you said, I'm coming from a place of blessing here. I have access. My wife is like, here's the budget line item for you to go get whatever video game, or video system that you want. But that's not the reality for everybody. And I recognize that because I know that was my reality in the past. But
yeah. Stepping away from games, though.
Yeah.
If Microsoft bought Nintendo, where is the creative impetus for the next Switch? The next whatever console from Nintendo? There is no creative impetus there anymore, right? Nintendo effectively becomes a software company.
Mm-hmm.
Because why on earth would Microsoft owning Nintendo fund Nintendo making hardware that would compete with its own damn hardware unless they specifically targeted some type of demographic? Super ultra handheld does this XYZ that they had no intention of going into with Xbox or an Xbox product. Doesn't that by itself start to condense the gaming industry and become a net bad? Now there is no reason for Microsoft to enhance and improve and iterate on their Xboxes because now they only have one console competitor that they really have to worry about when it comes to hardware, not 2, potentially 3 if you consider Steam and Steam Deck a viable entry in a console war. Right now, it's of course not.
if we look at the current handhelds though, and the fact that we have a Steam Deck, the fact that we have the Rogue, the fact that we have the Google G Cloud, the Logitech, like we're actually seeing more innovation and more people trying different things as opposed to less. And that is only because that you now have access to more games, where before trying to launch a handheld as a platform as opposed to as of something that is just additive to your gaming, that ends up becoming more of a barrier. So if Microsoft were to and honestly, I it would be weird for me to see them say, we're going to just shutter down the Switch. We're going to shutter down, the handheld that they have. That I think that would actually be them shooting themselves in the foot. Because
why wouldn't they? Looking at the Switch from the technology that's baked into a Switch, it is from every conceivable metric as far as its performance, it is a subpar performing handheld compared to things like the Xbox, the Steam Deck, the Rogue Ally. So if Microsoft wants to get into that space, they can get into that space now without buying Nintendo and make their own handheld to compete with the Steam Deck, to compete with the Rogue Ally, to enhance cloud gaming in different ways. They can do that already. Maybe Switch has a few patents that they'd like to get a hold of, motion controls, things like that, of course. Yeah. But they don't need Nintendo for that. And I don't believe in a world where Microsoft buys Nintendo, Troy, that Microsoft all of a sudden tasks Nintendo with, we really like what you do in the handheld space, but we want you to amp it up. I feel like that's something that Microsoft just says, we think we can do that better anyway. We just bought you because we didn't want the Switch on the market competing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because competition breeds innovation, and would we have the Switch now in the form that's in, despite the fact hardware wise it's always a generation behind. Even when they were doing full consoles, their hardware was always a generation behind everybody else. But by seeing that going forward, would we see Nintendo where they are now with the handheld device using their third-party games like that? If Microsoft had purchased them at some point, before that came out, and I have to believe the answer would probably be no.
See, if I was in charge, obviously in this hypothetical, thought experiment, I would just let Nintendo.
See, now he owns the damn companies in this hypothetical experiment. You just keep giving yourself promotions.
Money, I don't have the money, but you can go buy Nintendo. Like nothing is stopping extreme opulence and wealth. No, but what it would be in this case, and by the way, the number would be 51 billion if Nintendo wasn't like for it, and if it would be more like, it would be a little bit more than the Activision deal, and Activision plus a Bethesda if it was a hostile takeover. So that's the numbers that Nintendo is based off the market cap. But I'm sure that Microsoft would easily overpay, because as soon as that bidding war opens, because you speak of the fiduciary responsibility, you then have Amazon and you then have Tencent coming in.
Yeah,
they're going to put offers out there. Like this isn't one company acquisition. This would be a big gaming a bloodbath in that case. But I don't see that innovation would die. Now I don't want innovation to die. I would just let Nintendo be Nintendo, just like Microsoft is letting Bethesda be Bethesda. And that didn't work out so well for them for Redfall. Everybody was calling them to be more in charge of it. And it's like, let Microsoft just be the purse. And that's essentially how, and that's how I would do it. Now, is that going to be how it is? No idea. And like you said, like in the Christmas time, fairy book story, like games are everywhere. You can play on your hardware. But I do see innovation in the fact that if a company can start making money, like same thing with the consoles. Imagine if there was a third party console maker out there that says, you know what, like the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation really isn't cutting it. I'm going to release $1,000 console. And if anybody wanted that, it plays your Xbox games, it plays your PlayStation games. That all of a sudden becomes a viable product that does not exist today, because you can't launch that today because they have that, again, like I believe the IP is the be all end all. It's not the piece of plastic that it runs on. And that's just my perspective on it. But if innovation died, then yes, that I would be wrong. And I would own that. I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, because one of the best things about Nintendo, the reason we want Nintendo to continue to exist, is they're the only ones who actually like, hey, let's just do it. It's fun. It doesn't. They're not always so like.
We don't have the Wii Unless Nintendo says, hey, we're going to be fine being a gen or two behind, Troy, but we're going to try something very, very different. We also don't have the Wii U, so maybe there's pros and cons with letting Nintendo be Nintendo sometimes.
That was their hubris and the marketing. And hubris and the market and economics is a really good balance of it, right? You know, like when it comes down to it. If you open it up and you make more sales, you know, and then, you know, more people have access to games, then great, you know, but you know, I think a lot of the pushback on it is it's just the aspect of change, because this would be a new era. Like when you start to break up like the golden era of video games, or when this happened and when this happened, this would be, and into the future, an unknown. But it's not an unknown that I'm worried about, because that's just my world philosophy. Like I couldn't stop Microsoft from buying Nintendo if I wanted to. I couldn't stop Sony from doing it. I couldn't, like, I would just be a bystander, and I would just be, you know, rooting and hoping and pushing the conversation, in my view, to be like, well, let's tell them our demands.
Yeah.
You know, this is what it, this is, and then get that understanding, because there's, in my also view, is that there's a huge education gap when these conversations come up. People think you can't buy a Japanese company. That's not true.
You can. There's just additional challenges if you're not also a Japanese company.
Correct. And it's like, okay, so here are these hurdles. Here, what does this look like? And honestly, like, that's why I'd say, like, the thing to do would be let Nintendo just be Nintendo and do Nintendo things. But then all of a sudden, Nintendo games are in more places, and you, the gamer, can choose what works better for you, which in my mind is customer focused. It's end user focused, and not pro company. It's pro user. But it is a complicated issue, because again, you take Nintendo off the table, and I like Nintendo being a wild card out there. So if Microsoft were to do this and take Nintendo off the table, it'd be a loss for everybody. And when people push back against it, they're operating off the same coin that I am. I'm just on, you know, hey, things could go well because I'm an optimist, and they're operating off the things could go poorly, and neither of us are right or wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like the console innovation is an easy one to point out. Like, why would Microsoft want Nintendo making any type of console unless it was specifically dedicated to a space they had no current plans to get into, and thought, yeah, that is a space we wouldn't mind getting into since you already have something cooking. But I think Troy, you can even take that to the game level, right? Like, if Microsoft owns Nintendo, there is literally zero reason at this point for Microsoft to invest heavily into platformers, right? Why? We own Nintendo. Let them do their Mario thing and their platformers, and maybe we put out a couple other platformers, but we certainly aren't going to invest in platformers the way we do today, knowing that we have to compete with Mario. Now we don't have to compete with Mario. Like, is that a little further off down the line? Is that a little more nebulous than why make a Switch if you're owned by Xbox? Yes, I will readily agree to that. But I think it does start to open those discussions of, well, why, if I owned Sony, why would I make a competitor to Uncharted anymore? Because I own Uncharted. You know, Microsoft owns Bethesda. I don't think you're going to see Microsoft putting huge dollar amounts into open world RPGs the way they maybe have in the past, because now they own Elder Scrolls. They don't need to. They don't need to do that. They don't have to compete with Elder Scrolls, or at least offer alternatives to that product. I'm not saying you'll see the disappearing of Microsoft-sponsored RPGs and open-world RPGs totally, but it does, I think, cause them to start thinking about, why would we invest in A, we already have Elder Scrolls, B, sure, let's go ahead and invest in B, and again, you start to see a trickle of less titles in certain areas, less innovation in certain areas, because we don't have to compete with that big dog game or that big game IP, to Brian's point earlier. Troy is stunned into silence.
It's just it is an interesting, you know, thought exercise to look at it, look at everything, and because there would be, you know, some positives, like you know, seeing Nintendo games on Game Pass, things like that, but there's also some negatives, because despite what Chad says, innovation is a big part of the industry and does make a huge difference in things moving forward, and that's a good thing for the consumers as well. Software is always trying to catch up to hardware. Hardware is always trying to catch up to software. You know, it's a circle that always innovates and always gets better for us. So, you know, going forward, you know, seeing games and non-competing against each other anymore because you own this or own that, That would be one of the possible negatives of such an outcome of, we're not creating new ideas, new innovative things, new different things because we own said thing and we're just going to let them do that. Then all of a sudden you might be losing out on what might have been the next big thing.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thought experiment. I mean, all three of us agree, put all your games on all platforms. That's perfect. That's the way we want the world to be, and that would be tremendous. I'm not sure I'm on board with feeling all optimistic about one of the big three buying another big three, Brian. I'll let you carry the optimism on that side. I just kind of have the pessimism of the looking at corporate structures, and I mean, there's certain benefits that the consumer would just by proxy pick up in such an acquisition, but the acquisition wouldn't be made specifically because it's better for its customers. It would be better for its money. Let us know how you feel about it in the comments below. I feel like this might come back when it's time for our question of the week down below.
I do have a question for you if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So you brought up the competition to Mario, right? And you're like, Microsoft wouldn't need to make a Mario competitor. What's Mario's competitor in your mind? Like that's one of the core issues that when I look at
No. I don't believe that Microsoft has a valid competitor right now to Mario. I believe I would, to put a little more detail on that point, it's Microsoft spends X dollars right now on platformers, whatever that dollar amount is, and whether it's through their first party or third party self-publishing deals, whatever deals they're doing. They do put in, because there is that, we can't not have platformers on our system. That would be terrible, because then nobody would buy them. They would just say, I like platformers. There's no reason for me to buy an Xbox. They don't have any. Good, bad, indifferent, tons of them, little bits of them. If they pick up Mario, the games that they create in the platforming space now become very much under the microscope. Which ones of these are going to be worth it or not now that we own Mario? And we can just throw Mario on the Xbox.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I still feel like there is no real competitor that they have. So Mario in and of himself, like stands alone. So like their investment isn't what it should be in order to try and go toe to toe. Because
ironically, they now also own Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. So
and this is the thing that frustrates me so much, that it's like, where's the Banjo-Kazooie? Because it's like they could release a Banjo and have that. It wouldn't be like a 1-to-1 to Mario Odyssey, but it would be still something that I think would be exciting to see. And so there's a lot of IP that's just same thing with Embracer. Just these companies just sitting on all this like IP, and I'm just like, well, I guess some of it's just gonna.
Embracer's got to be really careful right now. They got a couple house fires going on as far as
they grew too fast, and all of a sudden they realized it wasn't going to be easy.
Losing a $2 billion deal the day before you had to go to your financial report, that is ripple effects that we are still seeing. Hey, before we slide over to the weekly bombs and finish up here, Troy and I don't know if you have, Brian, but have been checking out Warhaven a little bit. Troy's first look on Warhaven is going to go up on Monday. You want to give us some early impressions on the free-to-play PvP melee smash things with hammer? This is definitely a game for Troy game.
Yeah, definitely like smashing things with hammer and running around with the mace and the shield. It's better than I thought it was going to be, for sure. As far as gameplay wise, I haven't dove into like the cash shop or anything like that yet. It's still very early on in the gameplay process. But Warhaven has been, the controls are better than I thought they would be. The actual combat is better than I thought it would be. The game matches themselves, while they do a piss poor job of explaining what's going on before they throw you into a match. Once you get a feel for what's going on, it's capture points and push this or take that or blow up capture points. So it's been a lot of fun. It's surprised me for sure. I really didn't think it was going to be one that I was going to get into. I didn't think the combat was going to be there. I didn't think the gameplay was really going to be there. I was worried it's going to be way too generic. But there's actual fantasy elements in there. There's healers and creatures and things like that, and dragons and a mix of the modern world. And the world is way more interesting than I thought it was going to be. So, I'm definitely intrigued right now. We're going to dive into it a little deeper over the weekend and suss out some things and see where we land on Monday.
Yeah, so if you want the whole review of getting involved in the game and its cash shop, spoiler, you'll probably be fine with the cash shop. Season pass with a season pass that rewards in-game credits for certain levels so that you can throw that extra change towards the next season pass if you want, and then everything else being cosmetic. It's generally a pretty standard cash shop like you see for something like Rocket League or things like that. So you probably should be okay there. I don't know, Troy. I'm interested to hear what you say about combat. It's one of those games that in early playing, I do enjoy it, but I feel like it's a mark or two shy from being a really good game. Like, I think there's some combat tightening that needs put in there. Some things don't feel as impactful as I would expect them to, and then other things blast somebody's head off, and you're like, well, okay, sure, why not? We'll stay tuned for your opinion. Have you played it all, Brian?
I have not played it at all, but
Cool.
I'll be looking forward to the review. And I'm all like, my problem with gaming isn't like the money at the moment. It's just having the time to try and play.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about, like I'm still playing like Starfield. I haven't finished Final Fantasy 16. Cyberpunk the 2.0 update just dropped, and I played some of that last night. And
that's being really well received.
Warframe, and then I've also been playing the first Descendant, closed beta, thing that they have. And I was like, it's been fun. I've been having tons of fun. This year has been incredible for video games. It's also been very like toxic online, but that's the internet for you.
Keep hearing positive things about First Descendant.
Yeah,
I've
same
been
here.
hearing a lot of good things about that.
Obviously, like one of the problems with the First Descendant as a conversation is that like what it will truly be judged on is how is it as a service? Does it feel like you got to go to the cash shop to have fun? And you can't know that until it becomes known. However, I feel like the gameplay loop, the overall cutscenes, and the experience, it feels really fun to play, and I hope that they don't screw it up. And from what I've experienced, they haven't yet, but I still got, we still got a little time. We'll see. It is Nexion, so you never know.
Why is Colonel Sanders using triple cast? Because he's a black mage. According to KFC's Twitter account overseas, we might be seeing the old KFC Final Fantasy 14 crossover and seeing the Colonel somewhere in the game. Whether this actually comes to fruition or not in-game, we'll see, but hide your chocobos. Because putting 11 herbs and spices on those bird legs is going to lead to some deliciousness, Troy.
In WTF news today, Colonel Sanders in Final Fantasy 14. Oh, man.
Let's slide over and do the weekly bombs. Weekly bombs. Dub bomb for something good, A bomb for something bad in the world of gaming or just life in general. I'm going to go first. I got to give an A bomb to the Elder Scrolls Online. A couple shows ago, we talked about them disabling gifting from their crown store and the impact that makes for guilds and specifically trading guilds and the in-game community that likes to do things by giving away DLCs or cosmetics from the cash shop and being able to do that through the guild or the crown store's gifting. That was disabled due to, nefarious actors. And we reported on that, and I think we talked about that, Troy, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. This week, there's an update that really just reiterates what they did to turn the system off and why, and that we hear that you're upset. We're working on solutions. So it was, hey, we've got news. There's no news. A-bomb to the Elder Scrolls Online. Go ahead, Troy. What do you got?
I'm going to give a dub bomb to the New World team. I think they've been doing a fantastic job with communication here lately, especially with the expansion stuff. I think they've been answering questions. I love the way they never sugarcoat the questions. They don't like paraphrase the questions. They take them as they come in, as rough and as obnoxious as they can be sometimes. And I think they've done a fantastic job answering questions, getting information out there. Had an interview with Scott Lane this past week. That'll go out next week. Looking forward to that. But I had going into that interview, I had 2 or 3 pages worth of questions, and they all started getting answered one by one as more videos and stuff come out from New World. And I was like, bro, my interview, you're ruining my interview.
You're killing me, Paul. Come on. Let me have a scoop. Let Brian.
Hey, give me something here.
What do you got, Brian?
I don't know. I'm excited for the New World expansion. I think that the team has been doing a great job. Their communication and their delivery is exactly what I would kind of expect from a games as a service. And honestly, I think one of the things that excites me more than anything else is that when we look at their 10-year plan and we look at the Lord of the Rings as an MMO, both as an established IP, but also by this time, you'll have a very disciplined and well-organized team that is enhancing the engine that is being built on. I think that's going to mean very good things both for New World and for whatever's to come next out of that studio and that team. So
there you go. 2 dub bombs for New World and 1 A bomb for the Elder Scrolls Online. From the viewers on YouTube and on mmobomb.com, Robert Stojanowski saying da bomb to the One Piece live action adaptation. While everyone was expecting another dumpster fire, yes, they were expecting that. The involvement of the creator and people who love the source material turns out to be good and loved by many. I know early impressions were kind of, but yeah, it really picked up steam. It really picked up steam. So good on that. Go ahead, Troy.
Bruckner says, the bomb for anyone using AI to expedite the process of making games. Sure, it's going to lead to some job losses, but people will eventually realize that means we can get more smaller gaming studios to produce more games instead. They won't work for EA or Ubisoft, but for new studios, their jobs aren't going away. They're being spread out.
Interesting take. We talked about AI and the potential impact to jobs in games. That's kind of an interesting take. I mean, maybe it's more Brian's optimistic type of take than some, but who knows? Brian,
Yeah, I mean, like to build off that, if these tools allow making games so much easier, it democratizes kind of the publishers more, and so then you're looking at actually more of a collapse on the bigger publishers who are going to struggle because they have so much overhead cost. And if this was the rise of new indies, that's where we're seeing all the innovation. I mean, that's even from the leaks themselves.
Yeah.
It's like the innovation's coming from indies, these smaller companies that are able to be more flexible and make fun, crazy things because the AAAs have so much overhead they can't risk it and in that self. Raggerty, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Says A-bomb to SAG striking video game companies. I'm really tired of hearing the same voices over and over again and everything. They got some game time for WoW, so I'm putting around doing the story in the X packs I've missed and hear the voice sounds very familiar. Oh, if it's a character from Overwatch, cool. And that is how I can, that's all I can hear now. On a side note, I'm a passive player in GT Online and I don't mess with me and I don't mess with you. Want to help? Ask and I'll help. If I see something, selling something and a griefer is harassing them and I'm in the area, I'll help you out.
Oh, so one of the nice ones in GTA 6. One of the nice, or GTA 5. Sorry, oh God, no, I didn't do GTA 6. It was a mistake. I swear to God, I didn't mean to say it.
I'm going to start taking the mic from you. Yeah. GTA.
Everybody's in, what, Raggedy? You don't want Nolan North voicing everything? I don't get it. Terminus Tartarus says, A-bomb for Unity. I mean, they're backtracking now, but as I tweeted from the MMOBomb account to Jeff Keighley, who was like, let's see the backtrack, I was like, you don't need to. If it lets people finish existing projects under the current terms of their deal, cool. Finish your projects. This company has already proven you should not renew with them right now. You should not. So yeah, they're backtracking. Imagine that. I don't think I have to elaborate on that. Another A-bomb to Magic Mike. Uh-oh, what am I getting an A-bomb here for? For calling Monster Hunter Dragon Hunter. Yeah, I did. I realized after the fact. As punishment, I'll make personally sure that your name will be Midget Mike in the Monster Hunter community. You know what? I can't even be upset. Like, I did it to myself, right? There's consequences to actions, Troy. Go ahead, take the next one.
Grave Smasher 23 says, I want to counter Troy's statement about AI and real people. Right now, we get game after game that are pure trash. All of them made by people, not AI.
I mean, neat thought. But AI is programmed off of learning models that are absorbing information from human behavior. So if you think the human games are trash, just wait until the AI-only games build you games based off knowledge they learned from human trash game creation.
Yeah, I don't think more games equals better games. I think we just need better games.
Question of the week last week. Do you think EA can do free-to-play Sims decent monetization? For the next one, why or why not? Brian is Nuno Silva says, I'm guessing being homeless will be the top activity in the new Sims unless you pay up. It may be. Troy, finish it off.
Sounds about right. Robert Stojanowski, question of the week. EA will most definitely make Sims 5 some terrible monetization model. Some kind of subscription, probably. The worst thing they can monetize is high-paying jobs or passive income. If you want your Sim to escape their 9 to 5, you better warm up that credit card.
Yeah,
you all have a credit card, right?
Don't go get a better job for yourself in real life, Troy, because you'd like more money. Just make sure you give EA money so that your Sim lives a better life.
That's right. Priorities, baby, priorities.
Question of the week this week. Would Microsoft buying Nintendo be a good thing for gaming and gamers as a whole? And if one of the big three had to buy another, which one do you think it should be? Who's buying whom? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget your weekly bombs. Dub bomb for something good, A bomb for something bad in the world of gaming or just life in general. And until next time, Brian, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, chiming in on all these things. Where can all these bad boys and girls follow you?
The best place probably is going to be on YouTube. I get a little ranty on Twitter, so it's like if you guys, it's like Twitter's just such a fun, chaotic place. But yeah, YouTube, you just search Ginger Prime Gaming, or you can just add Ginger Prime Gaming, and it's going to be the channel that pops up. And from there, if you're ever curious, I cover a lot of different games. I have a lot of different channels that like talking about games, and so you can kind of follow the rabbit hole from there to find whatever you like. If you enjoy the content, it's great. And if not, no worries. Just go find something to make your day better.
Yeah, you got all New World stuff. You got Throne and Liberty stuff. You got Blue Protocol stuff. You trash Final Fantasy 14 occasionally, I hear. I hear that's the rumor that...
I didn't say I trash it at all. I call it what it is. And it's that, hey, like, if Yoshi P wants... And, like, I stepped away focusing on family, health, comedy, and playing New World. And the game's going back to New World, which is going to the New World. I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, I'm on a journey to lose 100 pounds. I'm 40 pounds down as we were talking right now.
Congrats.
And thank you. And I still got a lot to go. And my health is more important than playing any other game. But as Yoshi P's designed the game, he's designed it to play at the expansion. Play the expansion and take a break, and I'm following his advice. Like, I'm not going to be mad at a game because it doesn't do all the MMO things that I want it to do. I'll just go play an MMO that does those things, and when Final Fantasy has a story that I want to jump back in on, assuming that I hit my goal weight, then I'll be playing 7.0. Otherwise, I'll wait until I hit my official weight at that point before I step back into any story driven MMO.
Good luck on that, sir. You're doing great. Congrats. Keep it up. Troy, where can everybody find you?
Whether it's on Twitter or YouTube or Twitch, wherever your socials are, I'm at NoobFridge.
I'm Mike Byrne. You can follow me personally right there at magicman1, but obviously follow at MMOBomb so you'll know every time we go live with a stream, hanging out, playing a game, news, articles, first look videos, giveaways, and more. Stay safe. We'll see you on the servers.